in capitalism, cyclical crises are common. They do come, and most of the economists they tell that these kind of crises can be taken care by either reducing the interest rate and increasing the investment in the economy, or somehow by taking some measures and increasing the consumption in the economy. So these are the few measures which most of the economists will tell, and these cyclical crises can come out, or some of the economists tell that these crises automatically they get overturned after 4 or 5 years. These crises are no longer there, and there is a growth period. The economy goes into a growth period. Then some are considering it as structural crisis. Structural crisis means it is affecting major parts of the economy. Like it is affecting the fiscal deficit, it is affecting the tax revenues, it is affecting the unemployment, it is affecting on majority of the areas of the economy, and it is affecting majority of the population also. So it starts affecting when majority of the population, the investment goes down. So it is affecting the investors, it is affecting the common man, the employment is not there. It is affecting the government spending is less because the revenues generation is very less. So almost, and banking sector is also affected, and adding to that the global phenomena like the trade war between US and China, the other effects in the global economy, the fall of rupee, all those things included. So when multiple areas of the economy are affected, it is called as structural crisis, and it is deep rooted. It takes time to come out of it. Majority of the economists say like that. Then some are considering it as terminal crisis. Most of them who are considering it as terminal crisis are Marxist economics, and they are treating it as terminal because of a reason. Because this crisis is not just an Indian crisis. It is a global crisis, and it has not, means no country has come out of it post 2007, 2008. It is continuous crisis, and it is terminal in nature. It is not going out because there is not a single way out. They are not seeing any way out of this crisis. So they are calling it as terminal crisis. So just to give an introduction of how various people are calling this crisis, now we'll come back to the present situation. What is happening today? See, right from the goods like car and tractor, two-wheeler, right from those categories to the FMCG goods, all sales are affected. Majority of the companies are telling that sales are down in last 2 quarters, and there is no recovery seen. So they are either shutting down their production lines, or they are going for a holiday. They will resume production after some time. So that is the news we are getting. Apart from these things, apart from the consumer goods, apart from the auto sales, various sectors like mining, steel industry, it is into a long-term crisis. Steel has not come out of crisis after 2007, 2008. It has been in continuous crisis, steel industry. And after that, so whenever auto sales or consumer goods are affected, the backward integration and the forward integration of that industry also gets affected. Those industries which are related to the raw material providing area to these sectors, and those which are further connected in the forward integration of the cycle. So all those are affected. This is the situation in the consumption and whatever we have learned from the news. Apart from that, if we see that this crisis, we are seeing it today, but the crisis which happens today doesn't happen on that moment. It happens way back, 2-3 years back. So if we track down last 2-3 years data, and I recorded some of the data, that investment cycles, the new investment made in the economy has reduced quarter by quarter, yearly in last 2-3 years. The new investment made by the corporates has reduced year by year. And even though there has been like Make in India, like a jargon being claimed, or some of the scheme like Stand Up India, Skill Up India, or Startup India, all those things have been raised. But in spite of all the ideas or all the emotions flown through those slogans, the sentiments have not passed into the market. The investment has not happened in the market. In last 3 years, it has reduced considerably. Today, we see even after the change in the baseline of GDP, which says with the revised baseline, it gives a little higher figure than it used to give. It is last quarter, April to June, yesterday only we came to know that it has come to 5% growth. Before that quarter, it was 5.8% growth. So, with those revised GDP also, the GDP is reducing. And so, we can say that investment, it didn't happen in last 3 years. Apart from the lack of investment from the investor side, there were some policy decisions like demonetization, like GST. And GST, in spite of claiming that it was very radical in nature and it will give fruits in the long run, and it will rationalize the whole tax structure, and center will be flooded with taxes, and it will increase the compliance also. Eventually the result is that the recovery of tax revenues in last 2 quarters has reduced, and it has reduced to such a level that they are trying very hard to maintain that fiscal deficit. The expenditures which were given in the budget, and they are not able to meet those expenditure budget estimates also. So they are spending less. So government is spending less as it claimed in the budget, because there are no tax revenues. The tax revenue generation is less as compared to what was predicted in the economic survey also. So what they were expecting from GST, that it will give those results, it has not given. So one side we see investors are not spending, consumers are not buying products, government is not able to spend much. Recently it has taken some loan from RBI to give some kind of injection to the economy, 1.76 lakhs crores, so that it will start. But 1.76 lakh crore is a very less amount. We cannot call it as a stimulus also. In such a big economy, it cannot be termed as stimulus also. It's such a less amount. So even that will not revive the economy. Its condition is very precarious. And so 3 factors we have seen. Investment has gone down. Consumption cycle is completely, people are not able to consume because purchasing power is very less. And the third thing is government spending is also not meeting its target. On top of that, they are saying jargons like 100 lakh crore of investment will be made. Government spending is itself falling. 100 lakh crore of spending, who will make? The question is, who will make? Whether investors are ready to invest, or government has the capacity to invest 100 lakh crore. Or by spending 100 lakh crore, they are claiming that it will become a 5 trillion economy in 2024. The question is how? The results are not showing it that way. So this is the present situation. So how to understand this crisis now? How to come out of it? Some people are telling that just by taking some measures like reducing the repo rate by RBI, it will make the money rupee less costly, and it will increase the liquidity, and the economy will survive. But even that has happened. Many times the repo rate has been revised, and still the economy has never recovered. And so interest rate cannot revive this economy. Some economists now, they are telling that it is the only thing that can change the scenario is the investment. Somehow bring the investment. Government has revised FDI rules many a times to call investment from outside, to call investment from the Indian investors, but it is not happening. The investors are not investing. So some people will say that just it's a matter of time and the sentiment will revive, and let us wait and watch. Many times in such crisis, people have waited and watched, but sentiments don't recover or don't resume the way economists say. So that is another point. So now the question comes, after understanding the present situation of the economy and the crisis we are in, how to connect it with the history, how the other crises have happened, how the other countries have faced the economic crisis in the recent past, and how to come out of it, and what is the way out. That is the pertinent question here. So if we see the history of economic crisis, capitalism has been crisis ridden since inception, since beginning, and there have been various dull phases. 1897, 1910 was a crisis, 1930 was a Great Depression, then there was a revival because of the Second World War, then after revival 1970 again a dull phase, where again after that phase the neoliberal globalization and neoliberal policies came. So it has been crisis ridden. It has come out of its crisis by acquiring some means or the other. And a gentleman capitalism by acquiring some ways, and then these crises will not happen. And most of the unemployment will get resolved, most of the crisis of society like poverty will be resolved, and the increasing differences between the rich and the poor will get resolved. It will resolve by acquiring some of the means within this system itself. So those are reformist, and they will try to reform this system itself. There are various school of thoughts. I will categorize them into three and convey my understanding of that. But before that, I would just like to quote that Marx told in Capital that capitalism is in itself inherent with crisis, and these crises will repeat itself in cyclical and other manners. And this, when he quoted these things, it is not like a prediction by some of the people who do prediction on the basis of just intuition or something. These things were quoted by him on the basis of understanding the way modus operandi of capitalism itself, why it is crisis ridden. And now we'll come to various school of thoughts in as far as crisis is concerned in classical sense, in classical economics. There is one school of thought which is neoclassical way of understanding economics way. In that school, they say that capitalism has a mechanism to run smoothly to eternity. It can run smoothly at its own pace, with growth, with everything flourishing, and it can run. There is no problem with capitalism. So when crises happened in past, people questioned why these crises are happening. So they were left with only two answers. One was, they were telling that these crises are a result of because of natural causes. Either because of some natural causes these crises happen, and the second is the psychological aspect of human being. Psychological aspect, they mean that somehow the whole community itself goes into a thought process where they don't want to invest, where they don't want to invest in the economy, they don't want to go into the economic activity. But also didn't happen, the Great Depression happened, then this big crisis has happened, and which is not coming out. So again they were questioned, and they were questioned long back also. After that, when they were questioned, there came the school of thought of Keynesian economics school of thought. Keynesian economic school of thought says that yes, the capitalism has its own mechanism, its own engine of running and economic activities, but at times, because it runs on the completely on the animal spirit inside the capitalism, to earn more profit and to have some kind of a it has some animal spirit into it, and that's why it is required to be regulated and controlled. This whole economic activity of market capitalism need to be controlled and regulated. So they thought that because the natural process of capitalism is leading to some people having more wealth, and most of the people were getting deprived of the wealth, and henceforth the economic activity the purchasing power of majority of people was not up to the mark to have more economic activity in the economy. They were of the school of thought that somehow we should increase the purchasing power of these people. So the question came, who will spend? Who will give them the purchasing power? So Keynes answered that. Keynes said that the way to give them more purchasing power is through government spending. So the whole welfareism, the welfarist school of thought came from that origin, that what we should do, government should do some welfare. They should do some welfare, they should put some money into the hands of the people, they should put some benefit schemes which will give some spending power to the people, and hence the economic activity will revive into the system. Even that school of thought was contradictory to capitalism, because somehow if we increase the government spending, the investor wants the labor at the cheapest of price. When people get some amount or spending power in their hands, the labor is no longer cheap, no longer at the lowest price. And in a cutthroat competition, in a long run, when many corporates are competing for a business, they try to ask the government, they try to form a system where this spending, the offshoot spending power which is being given to people, gets detached from the people, and people come openly into the market, so that there is a balance between the employed youth and the unemployed people. The employed people and the unemployed people, there is a balance. So there can be a bargain with the labor which is standing outside the factory and the labor which is standing inside the factory. This bargain tends to strike to a balance of giving some wages which are market driven. So normally capitalists will always try, especially in a situation where even after giving their purchasing power, it tends to go into a depression where even in spite of the spending power given to the people, they no longer purchase all the goods in the society. And then there comes a movement which says that even labor should be free and labor should be open in the market, and it should sell its labor openly. So even that was criticized by the classical economists, and then came the neoliberal policies. Neoliberal policies comes after the Keynesian model, where under consumption, they thought, the Keynesian economist school of thought said that because the consumption is less, the production is not happening. So consumption is driving the production. Less consumption is driving the less production. So what we have to change is the consumption. So then but there is an error in that understanding. I'll tell afterwards when I'll explain my understanding to that. So that consumption is driving the production, so somehow we have to change the consumption. So that consumption, government intervened into it, and they tried to change that consumption among the people. But even the growth engine, or the growth with which capitalism runs, or the business runs, it is contradictory to that, and it also fell. And then came the neoliberal policies. So under-consumptionist school of thought gave way for the neoliberal school of thought, in that the market is opened up for other economies. Like the spending will come from outside, the investment will come from the outside, the spending will happen cross-border also, and trade will increase among countries, and especially the developed economies will try to spend or try to invest more in the developing economies, and the market of developing economies will help the developed economies to sell their products. So in this way, the liberalism and the neoliberal policies shaped up. After the neoliberalism, and adding to neoliberalism, there is one more thing which came in, is the finance capital. The finance capital, the introduction of finance capital happens when, other than the production cycle, which is producing the value and the goods in the society, there is one more parallel way of producing the value, which is the speculative method of producing the value, which is the market, the share market. So that is built up on the production cycle. The share market is built upon the production cycle, and it's a speculative creation of value. So that also is the same phenomena of same time. And after the neoliberalism, we see 2007-2008 crisis, where in spite of the finance capital being a part of everyday's life, we have seen in USA that it started with the banking crisis. The banking were giving loans, and people were not able to pay the debt. Even the corporates were not able to repay the debt because they were not, in spite of investing, they were not getting the enough return to pay the debt. And banks itself, who were functioning as corporates, they were lending so high, and they were also under pressure to create more and more profit with the competition among the banking sector. They were also not able to produce the profit as they wanted. So they were giving loans, and these were not being repaid. So USA came into a deep crisis, and it had a cascading effect overall world crisis. Then we see the crisis has shifted from west to east slowly. Then we can see its expression in a socio-political manner. The rise of people in France because of the basic wages, the security, social security reducing in France. First of all, we saw in Greece, where there was severe crisis, austerity measures, and the Greek economy completely went into doldrums. Then we have seen in many other countries like Brazil, Turkey, many other, Spain. Then Brexit is also happening because they are considering that why to share the losses with of others. Brexit is happening. So these are all expression of crisis of economic system itself in a socio-political sphere. And now we see in India the crisis which started. People were having tall claims that when world is in crisis, India is safe, and India has not landed into crisis. But it happens in economics. It happens in that way that when crisis starts from one part of a geographical location, especially from a developed country, when it is coming to a developing country, it takes time, and it has taken enough time. A lot of things have happened in between. There have been some dull phases. 2007 to 2011 was a good time. Then came a dull phase. Then first 2 years of Modi government were pretty good in terms of investment, if we can say just by that measure. So they were pretty good 1 or 2 years. Then it came into this phase. So just reducing the understanding of crisis with government, linking to government, is not correct. One should be able to look into crisis in a global manner, in a historical manner. So this crisis also, if I try to connect what I told in the historicity of the events which has happened in the world, this crisis also is terminal in nature, because the various wings of government which are affected today, the various wings of economy which are affected today, will not come out of this situation by putting some investment from external sources, by putting some external agency into a role, or by putting some government intervention. See, this unemployment, if we see the rate of growth of unemployment, it is so huge that in spite of government claiming that, okay, I will fix 15 lakh vacancies are vacant in central government and public sectors, I will fill those vacancies, 15 lakh vacancies. It will not fulfill that. The unemployment is huge. Apart from unemployment, the contractualization, the informalization of labor, the complete contractualization is such huge magnitude that these little bit of investment, little bit of government spending will not fix it. Adding to that, this is the people who are employed. There are many people who are doing double work. The people, I have seen many people, like person who is working in Uber Eat in the morning is working in Ola bike in the evening. That means 14 to 16 hours of work they are putting for 12 to 15,000 of wages in the month. This is the reality. Some people who are working in factory as a casual labor in the morning is working in a food eatery in the evening for 4 to 5 hours. That is the reality. And majority of the youth, majority of the public, who is the majority in our country, we might not come into that category, but they are the majority and they are into that livelihood condition. This is the people who are in double employment. There are people who are in no employment. There are people who are in contractual employment or temporary employment. There are people who are in seasonal employment. So this is the reality. In spite of the various what we can say populist measures claimed by any government, this situation cannot be tackled by just some monetary measures or some fiscal measures. It cannot be tackled. The magnitude of problem is huge. The health facilities for majority of the people, the education facilities, the increasing privatization in education, the overall malnutrition. I recently heard a fact that India is at par with most of the African countries as far as malnutrition is concerned, because the kids at the age of 5 are having their head bigger than their body. That is a sign of malnutrition. When the head of a baby is bigger as compared to the body, is the sign of malnutrition. And most of the rural and many urban kids are into that category. So when these armchair economists or you can say who are pro their class, they take huge claims that we will revive the economy, we will set right. Some of the things they will set right, and some figure they can produce that okay, this is happening. But if we consider the complete historicity, it has identical situation with what happened in USA. USA banking crisis happened. In our case also, IL and FS, the fall of the default of IL and FS, not being able to pay the loans, then various capitalists not being able to repay the loan, the NPAs, the rising non-performing assets has been completely increasing day by day. Then the defaults in loan, this one is a legal default, that they have become NPA. Then government comes out to bail them out. Then government gives them a package, something they have said that they will again give now. Nirmala Sitharaman has said that they will remonetize the banks again. So banks have had frauds. Banks have had last year banks have seen 74% in the growth in frauds, and nearly 75,000 crores of fraud has happened. And no, 1,75,000 crores of something fraud has happened, and now government is again remonetizing the banks. So in order to bail them out, now they have come out that the loss-making banks and the profit-making bank will be combined. They will be clubbed together. So this is also a policy where the losses will be clubbed, and again some package will be given to the banking sector to remonetize, to reinvest, and the capitalists will again take the loans, and they will not feel like investing because in spite of the return from this economy, because the purchasing power from downward itself has reduced so much that they don't find enough return from the economy. They try to deal in speculative markets. So most of the capitalists are spending in Singapore stock exchange. They are spending outside. They are storing their money in tax havens. They are rerouting the money, and they are involved in a lot of corporate misdoings, what we can say. So these claims will not help. What we have to see is through this historicity is it is similar to what happened in US. The IL and FS fallen. The banking sector has come into complete crisis. There is a liquidity crunch. This liquidity crunch cannot be recovered by changing the interest rate or by government giving some kind of small stimuluses. It will not recover. Even though if it makes the fiscal deficit, they try to maintain that thing because that is monitored by various people. So even though if they try to maintain fiscal deficit by taking loans from various sources, now they have started taking loan from outside also. So even though they will try to maintain that fiscal deficit, the condition of banking sector and then the investment sentiments will not increase very soon. So this mechanism, which is told by many people, many bourgeois economists, that investment will revive, I don't see any future in that. And I think the only thing is people should understand that this crisis is not only a economic crisis, it's a social crisis. And it's not by like government will change the government and things will happen. It is about when people start asking for their rights and their genuine rights in the society of having food, having a household. We can see in last 3-4 years there have been huge real estate boom in the sense of construction, but most of the houses are vacant. So there are homeless people and there are people less home. They are at the same time. This is happening in reality in Hyderabad also, in various places also. Yeah, so now I'll open up the discussion. Anybody can just say their view.
All right, so the thing is that of course it's worrying about the bank sector and all. This terminal thing, it sounds a bit too alarming. I hope you are incorrect about that, but you don't know. I thought that some measures to transfer purchasing power to the masses, some of that is probably needed. So could it be called a socialist measure? I don't know. But maybe that, if the purchasing power gets back into the hands of the people, it might generate a cycle of consumption and spiral upwards. There is of course a global aspect to it, no doubt. But this is just an initial take. Will that help?
Yeah. See, that will not be a socialist measure, that will be a welfarist measure. And many people have that opinion that somehow we can have that welfarist measure. But when welfarism came, that time neoliberal globalization has not happened. Today, in a scenario when all economies are global in nature, we have lot of trade with US, we have lot of trades with China. And in that scenario, if we try to have such welfarist measures through government spending, even it is a question mark because government doesn't have anything to spend now. But even though if we consider that government will spend and give some kind of purchasing power to people, so they want a more ease of business, ease of doing business is their claim. So when they are saying ease of doing business, that means labor should not have much say, wages will be defined by the market, and environmental laws should not be very strict, and the entry point of FDI should be very smooth, and on top of that there has to be infrastructure and everything, and tax has to be, corporate taxes has to be slashed, and we are saying that taxes are already less. Taxes are already less, that's why fiscal deficit is increasing. Taxes, revenue collection is less, government wants to spend more on their regular expenses, and government earning is less, revenue is less. Now, how that situation will happen?
In my knowledge in this subject is very, very poor. I came to know everything only from you just now. I just want to know, will there be money in the bank, or I have to store money at home, stock money?
As an individual you are asking,
Yeah.
I think both are safe. Either you, because as an individual it won't affect much. So only thing which will affect is the employment of yourself or your family members. The employment and the uncertainty in the employment will increase day by day, and that is the only factor which will increase. As an individual you can keep your money anywhere. I don't see still that phase where means main banks will default, in that sense where they will not be able to repay the individual money also. So that thing I am not able to see. Only in a larger macroeconomic sense I was telling the bank defaults. Banking default in a macroeconomic sense, like they are not able to take back what they have given on loan to big capitalists. That in that sense I was.
Last crisis in 2008, I was abroad in England. I remember watching the television, and there was a run on the banks. There were loads of queues of people there trying to withdraw their money because they were worried that the whole system is going to collapse. Do you see such a situation developing here? Because I see that before 2008, the macroeconomic situation, 2006, 2007, huge companies were withdrawing loads of their stocks, billions of dollars.
Yes.
Over the last 2 years, probably the same situation in the world is happening.
Yes.
Do you see a run on the banks here?
Actually, it depends on the, I think, the public, because worst situation was there in demonetization in India, but public didn't came to on the roads. So even in France, there is an inflation, people come out on the road, and people try to question the government. People try to question the establishment. People try to question the state of affairs.
Yeah. Banks. They were on queues outside banks trying to withdraw their money out of the banks.
Yeah, that's
they're
what.
worried that the system, let's take our money, hide it somewhere.
That's what I was telling, that there is a what we can say, there is some kind of rationale in that public where there is something happening in the society. They are well aware of that there is something happening. Economy is running into crisis. So let us take our money. That kind of individuality and that kind of social common consciousness is there to come out and ask for what is theirs. But in our country, presently, I don't see that also happening, because in other countries, whenever there is inflation, there is some kind of unrest is seen. People try to question the government. People try to question the government moves. People try to question the present, what is happening, why unemployment is there. But we have run through various much more disastrous situations than that, and people have not come out in public. So
yeah, that's a good one. Another one is that I thought it over as to why in 2008 in the Western world, where I was living at that point in time, there was a major crisis sort of situation. Whereas here, the reasons, they said there was no major crisis here at that point in time, but from what you say, that things were going on here too badly.
Yeah.
Now I questioned a few economists as to why there was a difference here to the West. And the points raised were two. One was that there was diversification of investment here, whereas the concentration in US and the UK was real estate. Meaning that's where all the investment was focused on. Whereas here it was more diversified because the Reserve Bank of India and others were following the rules to diversify the investment rather than put all their eggs in one basket. That was one thing that they told me was happening here. The second thing they said was, in the West at that time there was debt economy. If you want to buy a car, if I had to buy a car there, I bought it on a loan. If I had to buy a house, it was on loan. Whereas here the debt situation hadn't developed to that level. So those were the two things that they said were different in India in 2008.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's moving towards the debt economy that existed in the West, because people want to live off debt. Is that correct? Those 2 points? Just expand on it.
Yeah, that is correct. I will first say something on the debt thing. Yes, that is true. In 2007-2008, India was not predominantly a debt society where everybody will take a debt, and some people were telling that because we have that our cultural thing that we try to keep individual savings with us, and there was that's why there was no decline in individual consumption in India. So we were not relying on debt instruments, but we were relying on our own individual savings, which we are keeping at home and in gold or in other manner. So that's why India never went into...
Or buy something when you have the cash.
Yeah.
Buy a motorcycle when you have, or build a house when you have.
Correct. So that was the claim that time they told, and like they were having lot of debt instruments. We were not having those debt instruments that time, 2007-8. Adding to that, I think the other thing was because of the stage of economy where they were in, and at that time where we were in. We were in a situation where we were entering into the service sector. We were becoming a service sector economy, and we were gaining more of the revenues, more of the GDP. The part of GDP was coming from the service sector. Like IT sector was booming, the call centers and all those things have started that time, and they were so in West the things which were labor oriented and which were monotonous in nature were being given to the economy, like India, Philippines, and we were taking up those jobs, and that was the thing which was taking care of the economy that time. In spite of the subprime crisis and the real estate and the debt crisis which happened in the West, the service sector kept on moving, and because of the IT, the whole IT sector was on a high upward movement, where there was something in that. So Indian economy was completely relying on that. If we keep the IT sector apart, the manufacturing was declining that time also. It has been declining from 2008 onward. That's why I told that we were also in crisis from that time onwards. But because of the additional sector like service sector, IT sector, we were being taken care in that sense.
Now you don't have a service sector going well here?
The IT sector has passed out that phase of its where it will reap those benefits to the economy.
So we're talking about employment. I just wanted to, sorry, you want to go ahead? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. So I just came back yesterday from China. Before that I was in the US and it's Latin America. Sure. I was in Latin America. So one of the things that I noticed is I've been trying to hire salespeople for the last year, and I haven't had luck. Part of the problem is the kind of quality of graduates that's coming out of the education system. It's not there. What I want, and even if I hire from some of the MBA business schools here, the top 10 or whatever, I've hired that. They want to have easy jobs. They're really not willing to work hard to make the money. And options are many. For example, they can just join an MNC like Deloitte or whatever. So I'm kind of confused about this thing that you're talking about. For example, in US, I've seen major social problems with drugs, racism. There are a lot of issues that are happening. In Latin America, they're relaxed. And in China, I've seen these people don't even know English, but they are conquering, essentially they work so hard, conquering their fears of English and all that. They use a translator and all that, and they're selling to the world. But in India, believe me, I probably interviewed about 70 plus people. I haven't had luck, and my standards are not that high. What's going on? Why are we having such a difficulty? I'm pretty lax with even my standards when it comes to, I was willing to train, but I haven't had, I tried Shine, this, that, and other. So can you help me understand where is that gap that you're talking about as one of the things? And then, yeah, that's one of my questions, and then we'll talk about the macroeconomic things later.
Yeah.
I just want to understand, why am I having these difficulties as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. That means employment is there, employability is not there. So people are not employable. That is the claim. So that is true. That the whole education system in India is not able to produce people with good skills and good quality work which they can put up. But generalizing that to the whole population is little question mark, because what I was talking about is in a like if we are seeing the crisis of today, it is not about sales representatives are not or sales company are in crisis. The present crisis is of crisis of production. The production itself is not happening. The investors are not investing. The production is not happening, and that is the main crisis. So can we say that even people to produce those things are not available? That's why production is not happening. But what I am seeing is that investors are not willing to invest in the economy because people are there. Manpower, various investors come to India because of the cheap labor available here. The labor is very cheap. Skilled people are available cheaply. And still the business is not doing well.
I'll tell you why. It's just an example. This is a real discussion I had with the Chinese factory. We have a 35,000 square feet area where we can employ about 4,000 to 5,000 people for wig making. We are into wigs and making that. Right? I just started talking to the Chinese. He was asking me, I was in China, he's a good friend of mine, Mr. Lan. So, and then he said, boss, I like you as a person, you work hard, but I rather going to help me with, I was in Burma as well, help me with your Burmese contact or Bangladesh or even Pakistan. I will never do business with India, I'll never set it up. I said, why? He said, you guys don't work. You look great, you talk great, communication is not a problem. You all speak English, most of you. Even when it comes to the labor, they do understand some of it, they understand instructions, but you just don't work hard. So I'm thinking that there is fundamentally, maybe we were a socialist economy for a while and then we're transitioning into this. I think from our educational system perspective and a general awareness perspective, that is the perception of foreign investor, and he eventually set it up in Bangladesh. He actually set it up, that unit in Bangladesh. He just says that you guys don't work. You're not a manufacturing economy. You just, that's a perception that we have to beat. Just a small example. I think it's a bad thing. I think we need manufacturing jobs.
No,
I want people who want to work for 20 hours. I mean, that's a wrong thing in accordance.
I don't think he said 20, he didn't
No,
specify
he
20 hours.
specified exactly
Okay, I
what-
want to just answer that, what he said. I have been told that some of the companies, Chinese and others, prefer to bring their own labor because rather than employ Indian labor, because they find that Indian labor is not that committed apart from the hours. I think there's a cultural problem here which we must face. I think if we can dodge rather than just put our shoulder to it, we'd like to dodge. Perhaps it's years of being just government, looking for government jobs. I think there's a psyche there that, you know, a government job, once you get in there, then you can just sit on your haunches and you don't really have to work. That kind of culture is really persistent. Plus, I'm afraid the labor unions have also been protecting and spoiling a bit of the organized labor. The unorganized labor has had it very bad. So there is this whole cultural heritage, and employability is a big problem. Now the government did try to bring in the skills, national skills development. Now, the sad thing is that people are not really opting for the places where there are pockets of demand, but only going to overused sectors. For skill development. So there are a whole lot of skills which were identified by the council and by the government, which had the potential of actually giving proper remuneration after skill training, but there were not enough takers. So in that sense, we're also very conservative, as he said. Like middle class people say, you only go into that job. And it's not just middle class, it's also lower middle class, it's percolated right down. So I think we have to address that cultural factor also. This is my take on it anyway.
Just a generic question that I have. You have a lot of payment apps that's come right now, and everybody asks now for you to get KYC verified. And is it safe to get it verified? Because I use a lot of payment apps, and I'm just little speculate that is it safe or not safe? Now that the new trend has come up, to use that UPI payment section. So can you just help us on this?
Actually, I don't have much idea on that, but many people of IT and finance who have connection with that, they say that it is not very safe, especially to companies which are not known. You should not give KYC.
No, I use like Amazon and all this.
Yeah, I think they are safe. Everybody.
As you said, there was a lot of fraud and all these things happening in the global market in US and all.
Yes.
And Amazon is one part of it.
Yes. But Amazon, individual consumer wise, it will not affect.
So many payment gateways which are coming up. In fact, WhatsApp is also going to launch its wallet. They have all kinds of, fulfilling the regulations, but still the regime has not given them the permission. There is some conspiracy happening. And Apple, on the other hand, is also going to have their own wallet as well. So
if you sync, you will sync with everybody else. So don't worry. So I just want to respond to this gentleman's comment about growth. So Edward Abbey beautifully put it, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. So, but capitalism cannot survive without growth. Whether there is demand or not, they have to keep producing, Like in post-2008 crisis in Germany, the government gave a, stimulus package. And BMW got some 100 or 200 million euros. And the condition was, the BMW said that we are unable to sell cars, so he gave us a bailout package. So the $200 million euros they got, and the condition was that you should not show the inventory. You have to manufacture new cars for this $200 million. So already the cars are piling up in inventory areas, and where will they keep all these cars? So what they did was, the unsold cars, they crushed them and they manufactured new cars. So this is what is capitalism. They are not bothered about the environment, what all is good happening. So this is the growth for the sake of growth. But looking at it from ecological perspective, actually The present development that's happening, it requires, if you take a top 10 list of minerals that are required to manage this development, these top 10 minerals are going to run out in as less as 100 years. So the earth does not have any natural resources to support this growth beyond 100 years. And before that, even the water, drinking water, which consists of hardly 0.3% of the entire water resource on the planet, that itself is in a danger zone now. In fact, if you take the list of most dangerous countries which are going to have depletion of water, Pakistan and India are on the top. So, on one side, we do not have natural resources to continue this growth. Another side, this looming climate change, which is creating havoc already, and we are seeing these huge droughts and these floods. So we have to look at this systemic perspective. It's not just economy; it's the whole thing. Because everybody will sink. As said, whether it's financial system or ecological system, everything is going to sink. So that's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that ecological part when I was terming it as terminal, because the ecology is also getting impacted across the globe. That's why it is another factor why it is being called as terminal crisis by many people.
So if there are no questions or no points for discussion, we will call it a night. Thank you so much, Farah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.